Why humans keep repeating the same mistakes. Every generation believes it is different. Every generation believes it is smarter than the people who came before. We have better technology now, better education, better data, better systems, better tools. And yet somehow, we keep walking into the same fire. Different clothes, different flags, different currencies, different machines, different screens, but the same human nature underneath. We build empires, then we get comfortable. We create wealth, then we forget the pain that created the discipline. We survive crisis, then we raise children who no longer remember what survival felt like. We invent tools to make life easier, then those tools reshape us before we understand what they are doing to us. We promise ourselves we will not repeat the mistakes of the past, then we repeat them with better technology. This is the pattern, and once you see it, you start seeing it everywhere. In countries, in markets, in families, in relationships, in social media, in ambition, in your own life. History does not repeat because humans are stupid. History repeats because human nature repeats. Fear repeats, greed repeats, pride repeats, status repeats, comfort repeats, forgetting repeats. And when the same human instincts meet new environments, the costumes change, but the pattern stays alive. This is the first lesson of the Arkden. If you want to understand the world, you cannot only study events, you have to study the human operating system underneath the events, because the event is just the surface, the pattern is the real story. Think about your own life for a second. You know the thing that hurts you. You know the habit that weakens you. You know the person you should not text back. You know the shortcut that always costs you more later. You know the impulse that feels good for 10 minutes, then leaves you with the same regret. And yet, you still do it sometimes. Not because you are dumb, not because you do not know better, but because knowledge is not always stronger than emotion. Pain fades, desire returns, ego negotiates, comfort whispers, and the body remembers pleasure faster than it remembers consequences. This is not just a personal weakness. This is civilization in miniature. The same thing that happens inside one person happens inside an empire. A society goes through hunger, war, collapse, humiliation, scarcity, and from that pain, it builds discipline. It becomes serious. It becomes organized. It becomes innovative. It becomes hungry. It builds roads. It builds armies. It builds institutions. It saves. It sacrifices. It remembers danger. Then success arrives. The streets become safer. Food becomes easier. Money flows faster. The children grow up without the fear that shaped their grandparents. The institutions become comfortable. The leaders become performative. The people become distracted. The culture begins to value image over substance. The system still looks strong from the outside, but the inner discipline starts to decay. And this is where the cycle becomes dangerous, because collapse usually does not feel like collapse at first. It feels normal. It feels entertaining. It feels like everyone is just arguing online. It feels like politics getting louder. It feels like debt getting bigger. It feels like people trusting each other less. It feels like families becoming more fragmented. It feels like everyone is busy, but fewer people know what they are actually building. The warning signs rarely arrive as thunder. They arrive as habits, small compromises, small lies, small addictions, small acts of cowardice, small decisions to choose comfort over truth. And over time, those small decisions become the architecture of decline. This is why humans keep repeating the same mistakes. Because most people do not notice a pattern while they are inside it. They only recognize it after the consequences arrive. Look at financial bubbles. The details change every time. Tulips, railroads, real estate, dot-com stocks, crypto, AI, whatever comes next. Each generation says, this time is different. The technology is different. The opportunity is different. The old rules do not apply. And sometimes, part of that is true. The technology really is different. The opportunity really is real, but human emotion is not different. Greed still expands when prices rise. Fear still arrives too late. Crowds still confuse motion with truth. People still believe they are early when they are actually being used as exit liquidity. The asset changes. The chart changes. The story changes. But the emotional cycle stays the same. Disbelief, curiosity, excitement, greed, euphoria, denial, panic, blame, silence, then forgetting. And after enough time passes, a new generation discovers the same temptation with a new name. This is why studying history is not about memorizing dates. It is about recognizing emotional patterns before they become expensive. The same thing happens with war. The generation that lived through war understands the cost of chaos. They remember hunger. They remember loss. They remember what happens when institutions fail and violence becomes normal. So they build systems to prevent it. They teach caution. They value order. They understand that peace is not free. But their children inherit the peace, not the memory of the pain. And their grandchildren inherit the comfort, not the fear that made the peace possible. Over time, the warning stories become old stories. The old stories become boring. The boring stories become irrelevant. And the people begin to believe that the stability around them is natural, permanent, guaranteed. But peace is not the default state of human history. Peace is an achievement. It has to be maintained. And once people forget what disorder costs, they start playing dangerous games again. They divide into tribes. They reward loudness over wisdom. They confuse strength with performance. They mistake anger for courage. They start believing that humiliation of the other side is the same thing as victory. And slowly, the social immune system weakens. This is not ancient history. This is human nature. And human nature does not disappear because we have smartphones. It just finds new platforms. Social media did not invent status anxiety. It industrialized it. Humans have always compared themselves. Beauty, money, power, tribe, reputation, belonging. But now the comparison machine fits in your pocket. It follows you into bed. It wakes up with you. It shows you everyone else's highlight reel while you are living your unfinished draft. And again, the pattern repeats. At first, the tool feels like freedom, connection, expression, opportunity. Then slowly it becomes a mirror, then a marketplace, then a scoreboard, then a cage. The technology changes. The human wound stays the same. The need to be seen, the fear of being forgotten, the hunger to matter, the quiet panic that maybe your life is not enough. This is why the real danger of powerful technology is not only the technology itself, it is what ancient human instincts do with modern tools. A jealous person with a phone has more ways to obsess. An angry crowd with an algorithm has more ways to spread rage. A lonely person with infinite content has more ways to avoid themselves. A powerful institution with artificial intelligence has more ways to scale its incentives. The tool amplifies the user, and if the user has not developed wisdom, power becomes acceleration without direction. This is the pattern behind so much of the modern world. We are becoming more powerful faster than we are becoming wise. We have more information, but not always more understanding, more connection, but not always more intimacy, more options, but not always more meaning, more speed, but not always more direction. And this is where the pattern becomes personal again, because the same problem facing civilization is also facing you. What do you do with more power? More freedom? More tools? More information? More ambition? If you do not understand yourself, more power does not save you. It exposes you. Money exposes your values. Technology exposes your discipline. Relationships expose your wounds. Success exposes your ego. Stress exposes your training. Freedom exposes your structure. This is why people can escape poverty and still carry scarcity. Leave a toxic home and still recreate chaos. Make money and still feel unsafe. Become successful and still feel like they are behind. Get attention and still feel unseen. All because the external condition changed, but the inner pattern stayed alive. Families work the same way. A family can leave one country and move to another, change languages, change jobs, change neighborhoods, change income levels, but the emotional patterns can still travel with them. Fear travels, silence travels, anger travels, control travels, shame travels, survival habits travel. Love travels too, but often buried under old defenses. And if nobody stops to look at the pattern, the next generation inherits it without choosing it. They call it personality. They call it culture. They call it normal. But sometimes, normal is just an old wound that survived long enough to become tradition. This is why understanding cycles matters. Not to judge the people before us, but to stop unconsciously becoming them. Every generation receives two inheritances. The visible inheritance, money, language, culture, family name, stories, land, documents, photographs, and the invisible inheritance, fear, ambition, silence, coping mechanisms, emotional reflexes, beliefs about power, beliefs about love, beliefs about what is possible. Most people spend their whole life managing the visible inheritance while being controlled by the invisible one. The same is true for nations. A country inherits borders, resources, institutions, debt, military power, trade relationships, but it also inherits memory, trauma, pride, humiliation, myths, unfinished conflicts, stories about who it is and who betrayed it. That invisible inheritance shapes the future more than most people realize, because people do not only act based on facts, they act based on meaning. They act based on identity. They act based on what they believe happened to them. This is why two groups can look at the same event and see completely different realities. They are not only seeing the event, they are seeing it through inherited memory. And this is why the world often feels irrational, because humans are not pure logic machines. We are story-driven creatures. We need stories to know who we are. We need enemies to explain our pain. We need heroes to organize our hope. We need patterns because chaos is too heavy to carry raw. But stories can liberate us or trap us. A good story gives people courage. A bad story gives people permission to destroy. So when you ask why humans keep repeating the same mistakes, part of the answer is this. We forget the pattern, then we inherit the story, then we defend the story, then we repeat the behavior that the story justifies. This happens in politics, it happens in religion, it happens in families, it happens in markets, it happens in dating, it happens in business, it happens inside your own head. You tell yourself a story about who you are. I am behind. I am not enough. I need to prove them wrong. I cannot trust people. I have to do everything alone. Once I make money, then I will feel safe. Once I become successful, then I will rest. Once I get chosen, then I will feel worthy. And then the story starts making decisions for you. Not your wisdom, not your values, not your future self. The story. This is how people become trapped in cycles they can explain perfectly, but still cannot escape. Because explanation is not the same as transformation. To transform a pattern, you have to see it while it is happening, not after. Not when the damage is done. Not when the relationship is over. Not when the account is blown. Not when the empire is already declining. Not when the body is already exhausted. You have to catch the pattern in motion. That is where freedom begins. Not in motivation, not in fantasy, not in pretending you are above human nature. Freedom begins when you can say, I have seen this pattern before. I know where this road goes, and this time, I am not obeying it. This is the difference between intelligence and wisdom. Intelligence can understand the pattern. Wisdom changes behavior before the pattern completes. A society with intelligence can build powerful machines. A society with wisdom asks what those machines will do to the human soul. A person with intelligence can explain their trauma. A person with wisdom stops passing it on. A trader with intelligence can read the chart. A trader with wisdom does not chase the candle. A leader with intelligence can gain power. A leader with wisdom knows power reveals character. The future will not belong only to the smartest people. It will belong to the people who can see patterns clearly and discipline themselves before the pattern consumes them. Because the pattern is always patient, it does not need to beat you today. It waits for fatigue. It waits for comfort. It waits for ego. It waits for the moment you think you are different from everyone who came before. That is when the cycle begins again. But the point of studying cycles is not to become hopeless. It is not to look at history and say humans are doomed. It is not to become cynical. Cynicism is just disappointment pretending to be wisdom. The point is to become awake, because if human nature repeats, then awareness matters. If comfort creates forgetting, then memory matters. If power exposes character, then inner work matters. If technology amplifies incentives, then values matter. If families pass down invisible patterns, then healing matters. If nations carry old stories, then truth matters. A cycle is not a prison if you can see it clearly enough. It becomes a map, and a map does not guarantee escape, but it gives you a chance. That chance is what separates repetition from evolution. To evolve does not mean becoming something non-human. It means becoming conscious of the parts of being human that usually control us unconsciously. Fear, greed, pride, status, comfort, forgetting, pain, ambition, love, survival. These forces are not going away. They are the raw material of history. The question is not whether they exist. The question is whether they rule us blindly, or whether we learn to work with them wisely. The world is entering an age of enormous power. Artificial intelligence, automation, financial instability, geopolitical tension, social fragmentation, new tools, old wounds, new machines, ancient instincts. This is why understanding human nature is no longer optional, because the future is not just about what technology can do. It is about what humans will become when technology gives them more reach than wisdom. And that is why the Arkden exists. To study the hidden patterns behind civilization, to understand why people, families, markets, nations, and empires repeat themselves, to connect the big cycle to the small decision, the ancient pattern to the modern screen, the collapse of empires to the habits inside one human life. Because the world does not change only through inventions. It changes when enough people learn to see clearly. So the next time you watch a society divide, or a market bubble inflate, or a family repeat the same argument, or a person sabotage the same opportunity, do not only ask what happened, ask what pattern is repeating. Ask what desire is being amplified. Ask what pain is being avoided. Ask what story is controlling the behavior. Ask what consequence has been forgotten. Because beneath the noise, there is usually a pattern. And beneath the pattern, there is human nature. Every generation thinks it is different, but the wise ones know better. They know that progress does not erase the human condition, it only gives it new tools. So if we want to build a better future, we cannot only build faster systems. We have to build deeper people. People who remember, people who question their own stories, people who can hold power without becoming corrupted by it, people who can use technology without being consumed by it, people who can inherit pain without passing it forward, people who can see the cycle and choose differently. That is the real work, not escaping history, understanding it deeply enough to stop repeating it unconsciously. The purpose of studying history is not to memorize the past, it is to recognize the pattern before it owns you.